Hola estudiantes! Today we're going to look at some irregular preterite tense verbs. So we're specifically looking at these four types. Some spelling change verbs, some slipper verbs, I verbs, and then some additional stem change verbs. So first off, I just want to remind you of your preterite tense endings. They're listed on there. You may want to practice those some before you get started with this. But let's go ahead and get right into it. So first off, spelling change verbs. This should look fairly familiar. This came up with commands, with usted and ustedes commands for sure. But when we have a verb that ends in car, gar, and zar, we have a bit of a problem. The yo conjugation, if we just put our new ending on there, it is going to look like that. But the problem is the verb is buscar, so that C is making a k sound, but CE, that C makes a s sound. So we need for it to sound like busque, not busse. So that is an issue. So anytime we're changing CA to CE, but we want to keep that k sound, we are going to change it to QUE. So instead of being BUSCE, that is going to be BUSQUE. So again, anytime a verb ends in CAR, you're doing the yo conjugation in the preterite tense, you're going to change it to QUE. Now the rest of your conjugations will just be normal. Buscaste, buscó, buscamos, buscastes, and buscaron. And that's because we're not changing the sound of that C when it has an A or an O after it. So it's really just the yo conjugation. So that's why it's a spelling change verb. Same deal with pagar. So pagar, if I spelled it like this, that G changes. GA, that G makes a G sound, but GE, the G makes a H sound. So I don't want it to be pahe, I want it to be page. So anytime we're changing GA to GE, but we want to keep that G sound, we are going to change it to GUE. So the yo will be PAGUE. And just like with buscar, the rest of the conjugations were just what we would normally do. Same thing with the rest of the conjugations for pagar. So we have pagué, pagaste, pagó, pagamos, pagastes, and pagaron. And then our last spelling change here, it's the same sort of thing, and the reasoning is a little bit different though. Empezar, if we just left it as a Z, Z does just have a S sound, so it would be empecé, but in Spanish we just do not like ZE. So if we ever change ZA to ZE, we are going to change that Z to a C and then add our E. So it will not be empecé with an S, it will be empecé with a C. And then the rest of your conjugations will just be normal. EMPEZ, and then all of your normal endings there. All right, so next up, slipper verbs. So these are a little bit complicated. These require that you know your present tense conjugations and stem changes pretty well. But when we have an ER or an IR verb that has a stem change in the present tense, so ER and IR verbs, not AR verbs, but it has a stem change in the present tense, like dormir, that is an OTUE verb, and it's an IR verb. So then we've got an issue in the preterite tense. If it has the stem change in the present tense, it will also have a sometimes different stem change in the preterite tense. So the verb back to dormir, it's ODUE. We are going to have regular conjugations for yo, tú, nosotros, and vosotros. But the bottom two conjugations are just going to keep the U. So it was O-to-U-E in the present tense, and it was a boot verb. In the preterite tense, it's only O-to-U, dormió, dormieron, so just the U, and it's only for the bottom two conjugations. And it's called a slipper verb because I guess it kind of looks like a slipper. The next one, preferir, same thing. It's going to be a slipper verb. Those bottom two conjugations are going to change. But where it was E to IE in the present tense, prefiero, for example, that was the yo conjugation. So it was E to IE in the present tense. We are only going to keep the I in the preterite tense. So we have preferi, preferiste, prefirió, preferimos, preferistes, prefirieron. And then pedir, that's an example of an E to I verb in the present tense. The O conjugation is pido. In the preterite tense, that one actually is still E to I, but again, it's just the bottom two conjugations. And if you would like a bigger list of preterite tense verbs that have spelling changes or stem changes in them, you can check it out in Voces. Make sure you are in chapter 18. And if you will click on los verbos irregulares and el pretérito, that will give you a good list. So you can see we have our spelling changes reviewed there, slipper verbs, dormir, preferir, and so on. So it tells you what the new stem change will be, just O to U, just E to I. All right, let's look next up at some more kind of slipper verbs. These are E to Y, and I'm going to go ahead and call those slipper verbs because it is still the bottom two conjugations. So the thing is, we don't like E, I, E, we don't like O, I, E, and we don't like U, I, E. So anytime that's going to happen in the preterite tense, we are going to change that I to a Y. So with the verb creer, to believe, creí is I believe, creíste, and then for that usted conjugation, it would be CRE, and then IO, but because we don't like those three vowels together, we just change it to a Y. And then creímos, creístes, and then that ustedes conjugation would be CRE, and then our ending, ieron. But again, we don't like those three vowels together, so we change it to a Y. Same thing with leer, leí, leíste, leyó, leímos, leístes, leyeron. So we change those Ys. And then down here with oír, we do the exact same thing. And again, you can go back to chapter 18 in Voces, and it will have those conjugated for you. All right, stem changes. So we have some additional fun verbs, and I've just kind of categorized these as stem change verbs, but it's just an extra set of verbs that are just different. So where we had our ER and IR verb endings, A, osteo, E, iste, yo, you've got all these different stem changes. You do actually have a third set of endings that you want to work on. And it's kind of a combination of AR endings and ER endings. So we have A, iste, o, imos, istes, ieron, or sometimes if the verb ends in a J, it will be just eron. But notice there are no accents to worry about here. So if you will look in Voces, same chapter, looking at our irregular preterite tense, you can see I've got my I to Y verbs in there. And then there is our third set of endings just for these special verbs. So for these specific verbs, andar, estar, tener, etc., you just have this new stem that you really just have to memorize. So let's take a look at these. So with andar, the stem that you can see on Voces is anduv, and then you put that third set of endings on there. So to conjugate andar, you would say yo anduve tú anduviste, ella anduvo, nosotros anduvimos, vosotros anduvisteis, and ellos anduvieron. So it's got this new set of endings here. And then if you look at estar, our new stem that you have to memorize is estuve, and then add your new endings on there. With tener, you can see you've got a new stem, and you have those endings on there. So they all have the same endings, and those three are all kind of similar, ending with uv. So I would group those together as you practice. And then with poder, poner, and saber, they all kind of have this u in the new stem, and then again with the new endings. Now with hacer, that one's a little bit trickier because there's this extra conjugation that you have to memorize, so definitely take note of that. But you can see with these three, hacer, querer, and venir, you're adding an I, or just changing a vowel to an I, either an A to an I or an E to I. And then with traer, decir, conducir, and traducir, these are a little bit different. The stem ends in a J. So, wrong thing there. So the stem here ends in a J for all of these, right? So something just to point out, where your new endings were a, iste, o, imos, istes. And then for the other verbs, that last ending was ieron. But these are those J stems. So when that stem is a J, instead of ieron with an I, it's going to be eron. So tradujeron, not tradujeron. All right? So keep that in mind. Definitely spend some time working on those. If you will go to spellion.com and conjuguemos.com, those are always my go-to websites to practice verb conjugations. Conjuguemos has some really great games. They also both just have some rote practice.